Brian Hartline is pursuing another elite receiver, and his name is Jerome Myles.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a Feel Good Friday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on Friday, August 23rd in the year 2024. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. During today's show, Locked On recruiting analyst Brian Smith is back with us once again. Him and I will dive into the recruitment of Jerome Myles, a talented wide receiver from Utah. Devin Carter, who recently flashed Ohio State gloves during his first game of his high school season. And we share our expectations for what Ohio State will be in 2024. And the offseason stuff to hit this should be like the bulk of the show, but we ain't got time for it. 3, 2, and 1. As you welcome in Brian Smith, I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian, I thought at this point in the offseason, going into the season, we'd primarily do shows about guys in the class of 2026. And then it came across my feed that Jerome Myles, a receiver in Utah, it's recently announced his commitment date, and he's considering leaving Utah to go to schools all over the place, and one of them might be Ohio State. Another receiver that Brian Hartline likes got in this recruitment a little bit late, but after watching his film, I understand why Brian Hartline wants him.
6'2", 205. He is from Utah, so grading the film is a little different. There's some good players there, but that's obviously not a great prep football state. He's a guy, though, that everybody wanted. He's got a bunch of SEC offers, like Southern Cal, etc. He's a legitimate player. Do I think he can play right away? Possibly. But again, coming from Utah to step up in competition to go to Ohio State or Texas or whatever it ends up being, that is not an easy endeavor. So he's a smooth guy. He's got natural hands, catches the ball away from his body. And he's a long strider. I'm not saying he is the same player, but he's built similar to Jeremiah. And then he's a real long guy. Once he starts striding out, it's pretty hard to catch him in the open field. So his second gear is pretty good.
You know, Ohio State's in a weird spot this year for receivers because they only have one guy, I believe, that's leaving. They may have some walk-ons that aren't ahead right now that might be graduating. But outside of Ibuka, everybody else is staying. And so when you think about a guy like this who's a 4-star, 5-star kid, depending on who you look at, that might be trying to go on the field, maybe just be a rotation guy in the backup spot year one. That could be what Myles wants. But even at that point, I don't know if he'll be able to do that next year at Ohio State if he decides to play there.
I don't think any receiver is going to walk in and just play as long as they can. They've went with correct me if I'm wrong, a rather shallow rotation.
Yeah.
I mean, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, they're both going to be back next year.
Yeah.
And that's 2 starting spots immediately. They've got plenty of other guys like Brandon Ennis, who will, I assume, be the 3rd starter next year. Where all the reps going to be? I mean, that doesn't count some of the other guys. I'm not beating up on anybody or anything else. It's just you got to wait your turn there.
Yeah.
And I will be very clear with the following. Out of all positions in football, the one with the kids with the least amount of patience is generally wide receiver. I don't know Jerome, but I've never spoken to him. He might be the most patient kid ever. But when you can go play somewhere else and be a number 1 or number 2 guy as like a sophomore, maybe even start as a freshman and, team that's in the major Power 5, that's hard. So if he goes to Ohio State, that'll be a good sign to me because that means he's a kid that's a little more mature and he wants the development. But I don't think Ohio State fans should expect it. Like his offer list is extensive and there are more places he could play early.
How hard is it normally to pull kids out of Utah?
That is a random state. The kids usually stay west. SC and UCLA get a lot of the kids, or a lot of LDS kids there, and those two schools have, in California has a lot of that. But it's just not recruited that much. So there's not a good barometer. They'll have, like, there's a kid named, I think it's Brock Harris, the tight end from Utah. He's from there. He's being a national recruit, like Auburn, Notre Dame, all, like, anybody's recruiting him. But there's like one guy like that a year there. So it's kind of hard to grade, but I don't think they're very worldly and understand what's coming. So that's why you see their list be so broad. Like, these kids don't live in proximity anywhere to the SEC or Big Ten, like traditional Big Ten. Let me be clear.
Right.
Nobody knows what you want to call the Big Ten anymore. Don't get me started on that. I hate what they've done, but it's going to be difficult for Jerome or anybody that comes from that state to figure it out. Like, if he visits Ohio State, maybe one of the tradition-rich Southern schools like Georgia or something, those are still really different programs. I don't know how a kid from Utah is going to react. That's not my bag.
The one benefit Ohio State does have in this recruitment is that Devin Brown went to the same high school that Jerome Myles went to. So same city, same high school, same everything. So that may be a tie that Ohio State could say, hey, we got this kid from your school. The issue is Devin Brown really hasn't played. So Myles can't really talk about, well, you went here, but you ain't playing. So maybe I should go somewhere else where I could play a little bit earlier. I'm trying to pull all ties in, strings in to be like, well, this works. But once again, Devin Brown's lost a quarterback battle 2 years in a row. And I don't even know if he's going to win it next year if he decides to stay at Ohio State. So as much as it is to have a guy from your high school playing at a school recruiting you, if that kid's not playing and you don't really see how he's being developed, I don't know how, like, it helps him. It helps Ohio State. But if I'm the kid, I want to see you on the field, not on the sideline.
I guess the best thing he could do is talk about the culture and the coaching acumen. I mean, I think it's pretty high. I think that's obvious, but it's still good to hear from somebody you know. How well is Devin being brought up? What does he think of the receiver room? And is it as true as they say? He's going to have firsthand knowledge of that because he's the quarterback. That might be the biggest asset to what Jerome is thinking. That could be good or bad for Ohio State. Just depending, like, that's a lot. But you're not going to tell him to, like, give a positive. That ain't going to work. So
no.
Ohio State's just got to deal with that. But you know what? At least he has some inside information. It could work or work against Ohio State. We'll have to see. From
one guy in Utah to a guy down to the southern portion of the country in Devin Carter, who recently made a big symbol, a big sign about Ohio State when he played his first high school game this year. We'll talk about that next. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Hey, Locked on Buckeyes fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you are going to love as much as I do, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. This episode is brought to you by Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus has the best selection of pool tables, game tables, shuffleboard tables, and more. And the best service is Central Ohio. Everything you need for in-home and backyard entertainment is at Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus carries the best pool tables from Brunswick, Ahasson, Canada, billiards, and more. And the grills, whether you like charcoal or gas or maybe wood-fired, Billiards Plus has a perfect setup for all grillers. They are family owned and operated. And when you talk to the staff at Billiards Plus, you know you're talking to an expert who won't steer you wrong. No matter the season, Billiards Plus has you covered for all your indoor and outdoor entertainment needs. Kenny, Sarah, and the whole staff will always go above and beyond to give you the best customer service in the industry. Billiards Plus, visit their showroom on Dublin Center Drive in Dublin. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, you can get it all from Locked On stable of college experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Brian, you have been at camps, you've been at games where kids are wearing Ohio State or X school gloves, undershirt, whatever. Maybe they're committed, maybe they're not. But if they're the uncommitted kid wearing, let's just say it's Ohio State gloves, that says a little bit of something about the recruitment. Well, Devin Carter, a receiver, a five-star receiver from Douglasville, Georgia, Douglas County High School, I believe first game of the year, came out there wearing Ohio State gloves. And everyone's like, oh, are you going to Ohio State? Like, he's a 26 kid, so you don't really know where he's going. But is that a sign right now that Ohio State might have the upper hand?
I'm going to get this out there right now because this is a discussion point that I see all the time on message boards, X, Instagram, and everything else. This is how it really works. These kids go to 7-on-7s. They go to a high school game, whatever it might be. In their bag, they might have 5 different pairs of gloves, maybe more. Sometimes it's just the first one they grab. Now, it could have been for whatever political reason. Maybe he just talked to somebody at Ohio State. That is possible.
Yeah.
As a general rule, it doesn't mean diddly. Okay. Fans love it.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got an Ohio State towel on. Kid may not even know. I've asked him, well, what about your towel you got on? They look down on it. They didn't even know. Like, that happens. So don't put a lot of stock in that. I've even had, and this is not a joke, kid will commit to a school and then he'll wear gloves for a rival at the next game. It doesn't mean diddly. So I know fans hate hearing that, but that's reality.
I mean, I love the real. I love the honesty. And that's good to hear, because if people, like, if I didn't do this with you all the time and get a different outlook on, especially kids in the South, I might read into that. I might say, oh, you're a 26 kid wearing Ohio State gloves right now. Okay, cool. Like, I think Ohio State has the upper hand, but not knowing truly what happens out there on the recruiting trail and what it actually means, I wouldn't know that stuff if you didn't tell us. So I appreciate all that stuff, though. But when you watch Carter play, what do you see?
Really twitchy. He's a guy that's a smaller version of Ennis.
Okay.
Can play slot or can play the field, the outside flanker spot. Can really run, but it's making the first guy miss.
Yeah.
And to put it in perspective, he plays at Douglas County High School. They have an elite collection of players there. He's one of 2 national top 50 receiver prospects.
Oh, geez.
Just in his class at that school.
Jeez.
Yeah, and they got a quarterback that's not like their 26 group. They got a chance to win state this year next. But they got 3 top 50 kids just in the junior class by 24/7. So it's a good program. I don't really know what he's going to be able to do this year because they got to share the wealth.
Yeah.
Like, the other receiver might be better. I've seen his name's Gregory. He's a bigger bodied kid, but like, good luck to the secondaries going against him because the quarterback's got 27 offers. So they're going to spin it. And it's just outside of Atlanta. So they get all kinds of players. Some of the kids, they don't go to Westlake where Cam Newton go. They'll go to that school. Like, it's a loaded area. But he's a really twitchy kid. Could be a punt return guy for you. The guy that runs some jet sweeps, maybe a reverse. He is not fun to tackle in space on a screen. That guy. That is exactly who Carter is.
Sounds like he's a guy that Urban would love.
Oh, he would have been back in his Florida Ohio State days.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, because I saw, who was it? I was on Facebook and somebody put up like Ohio State guys, receivers, leader in receiving yards, going back to the 90s. And I saw Curtis Samuel. And as you're talking about him, I don't know if he fits that Curtis Samuel role, that H-back role a little bit, but I know Urban liked those guys that are shifty, maybe a little bit smaller. So maybe an Urban guy. How does how does Brian Hartline go about recruiting receivers? And this goes back to Myles too. Hartline's one of those position coaches that's going to get OC jobs or OC interviews, head coach interviews every offseason. I think he entertained the Cincinnati job recently, but didn't get it. So I'm trying to curious, like with Myles in the class of 25, with Carter in the class of 26, as good as they are, with how you think Brian Hartline will develop them, you almost have to think in the back of your head, this guy wants me, but he's not even married to his own school. Why in the world should I play for him when we already know he's going to take interviews to take jobs elsewhere?
This is one of the conversations that I have had for years with people, and there's no good answer for it, because I've had this even with college coaches. You can have 100% intention of staying at school X, whatever program. But if you get a phone call that doubles your salary, I mean, and it's not like Hartline's hurting for money. He's a rich guy, but it's the principle of it.
Yeah.
And with the more money, obviously he wants play calling duties. They're not going to be able to keep him more than this year, next year is my guess, like realistically, if he wants to leave. And here's the X factor. I know Ohio State fans won't like this, but it's true. He'll get more offers because he's not a good recruiter. He's an elite recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to be gone soon. Two things are going to happen. Number one, whenever the year is that it happens, they're probably going to lose a receiver either right before or right after signing day. That's just the way it is. Kids pick coaches 9 out of 10 times over schools. You can throw all the things you want at your computer screen or your TV. It's still true. Secondly, that also means your roster is going to get poached. It's going to happen. The good news is Ohio State has a lot of money and they'll get another good receiver coach. Can you imagine how hard it's going to be?
Right.
Like, who would want? You know what I mean? Like, it's not rocket science. So it depends on where he goes. You know, one of those kids might even transfer to where he's at. You never know. Kids pick coaches, not schools.
So since kids pick coaches, not schools, is that why you think David Sanders Jr. did not come to Ohio State?
Now, that's an interesting question. They haven't done very good with O-line recruiting, so that might be part. He's never been a great recruiter, is what I've been told. But, I mean, if you don't want to be at Ohio State, so be it. I have no idea who Tennessee's O-line coach is, but to my knowledge, he's not an elite recruiter either.
Mm-mm.
So this might be random. And for those who don't know, Sanders is an extremely intelligent kid. For whatever reason, that might have just been the happy medium. It's one state over, not too far from him, but mom's not next to him at the same time. It's the happy medium there.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my bigger guess, because like he gave Ohio State a shot. He took it OB and the whole nine. So I know O-line coach at Ohio State's taking a beating, but I don't think this one was really on him. Every school in the country wanted Sanders.
Yeah. No, I don't. My only issue is struggling to recruit outside of Ohio at that position. You're like, Ohio's not producing 4 or 5 stars every year on the O-line, like the elite of the elite guys. So if you're only able kind of to recruit in Ohio or maybe the surrounding states, you're really going to have a hard time with these type of recruitments, because like Sanders, I watched his recruitment video or commitment. I think it was live on YouTube. You said he was smart. I had never heard him speak like that. Very smart individual. He got emotional. He cried while talking about his family and his friends. And I'm like, oh, so everything Brian's saying about you is true about you're not the normal 18-year-old kid. You're not. And so maybe he knew something like, hey, he's put guys in the NFL. He's helped develop certain guys, but maybe him not being the best recruiter, that might not be the best fit for me. I don't know, but I'm really curious. How does a guy get out of a rut of losing these battles to win them down the road?
They need somebody from this unit this year, and you can tell me, Jay, which guy it is. It needs to be an award winner. They've had guys get drafted. They've developed pretty well. He's a good football coach. The only thing you can do is obviously continue to recruit well, get in on kids early, blah, blah, blah. You need somebody to be a top 15 pick or something. I don't know if that's realistic, because that's a small sliver, but man, kids, especially receiver, it's really bad. Who have you put in the NFL lately and were any of them first or second round picks? It's ridiculous. It's a terrible barometer to go by, because so much of it at receiver is just pure talent, but kids still look at it that way to a certain degree. Outside of Chris Olave, every other kid they've had go to the draft was highly recruited.
Yeah.
They kind of knew he was a 3-star kid, and obviously everybody missed on that. But Ohio State figured out, and he played as a freshman. He was really good. So O-line is a little harder. Some of the best players at Ohio State at a lot of different positions were 3-star guys at one point. Troy Smith, I don't think, was even an elite recruit. So he was just a guy. They need somebody to pack up and head to the NFL draft and impress, et cetera, going into the next class. That's about the only thing I can tell you, because it seems like they're in on everybody. They just don't get them. I don't know. How many O-line commits do the Bucs have right now?
2.
Bro, I'm telling you right now, that's gonna bite you eventually. You cannot have a 2-man class if that's how it finishes. 3 is like bare minimum, and I'm assuming they'll get that. But will any of them be stalwarts? Right now, I don't know if that's the case. The one kid I like a lot, he's been rated high forever. He's a local kid. He's the one elite guy in state. If they'd have lost him to Michigan, there would have been pitchforks in Columbus. But no offense to Ohio State. Right now, if I'm a kid picking between the two, it's pretty easy which one's the better O-line school. It's not competitive. So I think they need to find somebody else outside the area, because to my knowledge, there's not another elite kid in state, like you said. And they just got to find a way to win. They've got a really good recruiting staff too. It is a little puzzling, but I don't know, man. They better find at least one more really good lineman in this class, though.
One thing Brian and I have been waiting to do is talk about what Ohio State will do in the upcoming season, kind of go over our expectations for the Buckeyes. Well, the wait is over. We're doing it next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the stuff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime, you can go there to get concert tickets, concerts to any live event. You pick it, they got it. And they'll allow you to get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They got the lowest price guarantee, and they got that Game Time ticket coverage where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Brian, you have done things today that, well, may have ruffled some feathers. What's the things you said, the gloves and other things about just recruiting, and that if I'm an offensive lineman, I would pick Michigan over Ohio State. And I'm pretty sure people made it this far to the show. They're saying, well, what does Brian have to say about Ohio State this year? Well, Brian, the floor is yours. The Buckeyes don't play week 0. They play week 1, got a weak non-conference slate. They got 3 big games that we know about. But what do you think Ohio State will be this year?
I think worst case scenario, the regular season, first things first, barring just catastrophic injuries to player XYZ, they're a 10-2 team pretty much at worst. Because like you said, a very key point here, who do you play? When do you play? The timing of games. Do you have for lack of a better phrase, a lesser opponent in between said really good opponent and next? Like they play at Oregon, but they don't play Michigan the next week.
No.
When you play back-to-back games like that, man, that's hard. That's really hard. You're beat up, and then you got to get emotionally charged again, and you're not as physically healthy. That's tough. So I think the Oregon game would be the only one I would pick them to lose, and that's a toss-up game, and I'm not sold on Lanning as a game day coach. I think that game, if it was neutral site or in Ohio State, I'd pick the Buckeyes, but like they might lose that game by field goal, but I think 11-1 is pretty solid. My concern is not regular season. I have no idea who the Big Ten will end up with as their top 2. Michigan is really hard to figure out this year. They could be 8-4 or 11-1. I have no idea. They have so much going on there. Kind of throw them to the side. I have zero interest in predicting a certain guy and I won't even say his name because it's so bad on game day. They recruit well. They've got good culture. They are terrible on game day and big game. They're awful. But maybe this is the year the Nittany Lions step up. And then you got Oregon, you got SC, you got Washington. Ohio State should win the Big Ten and the Big Ten championship game. right? I mean, they should.
Right.
Now the question that's talked about I read Ohio State message boards. It comes up a lot. Just going to ask you this because I don't think he is the guy. Do they have the quarterback that can beat somebody like Georgia in a neutral field game?
No, they do not. Not starting right now. I don't think he can.
That is my opinion as well. I think this is a Final Four team that will come up short because they're not good enough at quarterback. I mean, they're a great roster. They've got a lot of talent pretty much everywhere. And even though the O-line coach gets beat up about recruiting, they're pretty good there too. I just don't think they're going to make enough clutch plays. And what could be similar to that game a few years ago that went down to the wire, if they play Georgia, that would be fun. I don't root for Ohio State or Georgia, but I mean, I'd be all over that game. That's a 7-point game one way or the other is my guess. But I'll take the guy that's going to be a first-round pick at quarterback for Georgia over the guy at Ohio State that I think will be a 5th or 6th round pick.
He'll get drafted. I was on the fence earlier about saying he might not get drafted.
He's
but
got the size and everything that
size. I mean, he can move. That's not normal. His arm is, one person said average, and I would say, yeah, just probably a good word to describe his arm. I just don't feel right with him long-term for all 12 regular season games. My hiccup also is, now, the strength is the defense. I think the defense is fine. The defense will keep them in that Oregon game. If Michigan is better than advertised, they'll keep them in that game. The defense, I think, is going to be good enough to even beat Michigan if Will Howard has a couple hiccups and messes up a little bit. My issue, though, let's just say the quarterback is not getting it done. Nobody on the team has any experience. So you can either go to Devin Brown, who really ain't played much. You can go to Julian Sand, who's as green as they can be. That's what you got. So Ryan Day this year is kind of like Clemson. I kind of compare it to Clemson. Trevor Lawrence's freshman year, they ended up winning the national championship.
2018. Yeah.
But the issue is they had success with that starting quarterback, a guy who started the year, I think it was Kelly Bryant, had success the year before with him. So he came back. They already had a system, already had some chemistry, realized by game 4 he ain't the guy. We went with the freshman. If Ohio State does that this year by game 4, realizing, hey, this ain't the guy, to go with the freshman, then you're going to try out a true freshman against Iowa and then against Oregon. You got a bye week. Then you got Nebraska. That's kind of a really rough way to kind of get introduced to college football if those are your first few starts. Not saying that's going to be the same timetable, but if Ohio State realizes early he ain't the guy, you better figure this thing out quick and pull him and put somebody else in, because if not, you might lose your first playoff game.
It's not out of the question. Let me throw a scenario at you. I forget the week it is, but they play Oregon in the first 6. Isn't that correct? Or
it's game 6. Yeah.
If you're seeing signs as Hartline and all these guys are working, with the receivers to get on track with whichever quarterback they're working with, I don't even know how they're doing it in practice, and you're seeing signs, do you at least consider, and I don't know which one it would be, Brown, Sand, et cetera, that's another question all to itself, do you think about having some packages? How would that work in terms of the mentality with the guys that you have at quarterback? In other words, like you said, he's 240 pounds, but he can move.
Yes.
And he will truck you.
Yes.
That dude is a physical player. He could have been an H-back. Like he's that guy. He just happens to be a quarterback too. Could you use him and another quarterback? I know a lot of people have strong opinions about 2 quarterback systems, but I have heard from somebody in Columbus that's saying has the highest ceiling. Are you willing, on a year that you spent a ridiculous amount of money on NIL, to give him the full reins, especially going into Outson, which, by the way, is a terrible idea in my opinion. That place is deafening.
Yes, it is.
Or would you wait until after the game at Outson, regardless, to make that switch where he's going to be playing in a game where, let's just be blunt, they're going up against somebody that has 0 chance against Jeremiah unless it's double coverage? That's why I bring up the 2 quarterback system. You got to get him ready a little bit, but it's just a weird year to have a really great freshman quarterback. And it's the same thing with Brown. Like, he hasn't played much. He hasn't been there long, but he's got a lot of talent. Either one of those guys. If you turn the reins over to that and it doesn't work, I mean, Ohio State fans are thin-skinned anyway. They're going to just be all over them. What do you think? Like, how do you handle that quarterback if it's not going good? How quick was the hook?
Early. I would say before the Oregon game, not want to say the hook, but you get kind of a 2 QB system. And I'm one of those people that has a strong opinion against it. I literally can't stand it. I can't
Yeah, I
stand it
don't
at
like
all.
it either. Only time I like is if you've got a guy that's really big for like
Yes.
goal line or short. One or two plays is different than splitting series.
Yeah. And so something like that, yeah, I hate the splitting series thing, but you got to do it early. The luxury is the Buckeyes non-conference slate is trash. It's really bad for the opponents. So you're going to get those younger. Saint's going to get. He may get a quarter the first 3 or 4 games. In the fourth game, I think it's Michigan State, who is not going to be good. So he may get a quarter all of those games. I don't know though if he's in the game in like late in when the Buckeyes are up 50, if they'll let him throw the ball. You got to mix him in.
You don't want to embarrass. He's got to play when it's 7-7.
Correct.
Are they going to do that?
No.
That's the problem.
No, they're not. And so we're all talking about the quarterback. I think Brian and I believe like the skills positions are going to be fine. I think the O-line will be better, Brian, this year than it was last year. Defense, I do think will be one of the better ones in the country. It comes down to their quarterback. I think Ohio State wins the Big Ten, probably goes 11-1. They can make the Final Four. If they got a matchup with Georgia, I'm picking Georgia. Yeah. Depending on Alabama and how that defense is, and if Milroe can really play better and figure out the throwing of the football,
he's a whole other animal.
Yes,
man.
But if he can figure this thing out, I might pick Alabama over Ohio State based off the quarterback alone. Right now, if it was just on paper, I pick Ohio State over Alabama. But by that point in the year, Alabama may be that much better than they are right now.
Ole Miss is the other wild card. They got a senior quarterback. They finally went and got defensive talent.
Yeah.
That team could be 8-4 or 12-0 in the regular season. I don't trust Lane Kiffin. He's won one game against teams that finish in the top 10. That was against Oregon when he was at USC.
Oh, wow. That was a long time ago.
They won like 35-31, and this is like 2010 or 11 or something like that. Yeah. He's just terrible in big games, but he is a good play caller. But in that league, they don't normally have the same defensive talent as a Bama and Georgia. I mean, it's not even close. So they went and got some kids from the portal. That's the other wild card team. And Jackson Dart's a veteran. So we'll see.
I want to answer my question after I ask it and then turn it over to you. The question, Brian, is do you think Ohio State wins the national championship? My answer is no. My pick right now is Georgia. Who's your pick?
I'm exactly the same. They got as good a depth chart as there is, and they got a quarterback that everybody picks as one of the top 2 or 3 guys off the board, and not the top guy at quarterback. Carson Beck's really good. No offense, I'm taking Carson Beck over anything Ohio State has this year, and the rosters are pretty similar otherwise. What's the most important position on the field, Jay?
Quarterback.
That's right. So, by the way, Kirby Smart's a solid coach.
Yes, he is. I really enjoy anytime Brian can come on the show and just chop it up and really talk things on our recruiting. We've done that numerous times, and we really enjoy it. You can follow him on Twitter at FBScout_Florida. Follow me on the same platform at JStevens07. We're out of here on a Friday. We'll see you next time.